Welcome the Honorable Norman Mineta, Secretary of Commerce.
Today is a great day for America because today we reaffirm the values and the ideals that are set forth in our great Constitution. The ideals of fairness, due process, and equal justice. And we stand proud today as Americans in the realization that we can make right the wrongs of the past. For all Americans of Japanese ancestry and me who experienced the events of World War II, there is no more profound moment in our history. And as we look back on those events, we look back not with bitterness or rancor, but with pride and resolution, because we know that just as our national ideals of fairness and equality can be forgotten, they can also be redeemed. My parents arrived in a very different America than we know today. When they came here to build a better life, they found themselves in an America that denied them the right to become citizens. They arrived in an America that denied them the opportunity to own real property. And they arrived in an America that saw them and their children as perpetual foreigners, despite the fact that my brother, my sisters, and I are all native-born Americans, and despite the fact that my parents considered themselves American long before the law recognized them as citizens. But for all the shortcomings of the America that was, my parents and tens of thousands of Japanese Americans were captivated by the promise of what the nation could be. And their story and the ultimate story of this memorial is the story of the struggle to make that promise a reality. Many Americans have profound memories of December 7th, 1941. But to me, as a 10-year-old child, it will always be the day when I first saw my father cry. He was filled with grief at the knowledge that the land of his birth had attacked the land of his heart. And in the months and years that followed, as we were forced from our homes, branded as enemy aliens by our own government, stripped of our civil rights, and forcibly interned, the faith of Japanese Americans in the promise of this country was sorely tested. And although our faith was tested, we can forever take pride in the fact that it did not fail. Even in the face of terrible injustice, Japanese Americans showed their devotion to this country. Some challenged the internment through the legal system in a heroic effort to enforce the standards of justice in the Constitution. Many showed their commitment by volunteering for the military, serving in the 100th Battalion, the full 42nd Regimental Combat Team, and the Military Intelligence Service in the Pacific. And many gave their lives for the country that had so mistreated them. and then in the years that followed the internment. And despite the burden of shame that we carried at being branded enemy aliens by our own country, the Japanese American community dedicated itself to the redemption of our great Constitution. And we were joined in that effort to redress the injustice of the internment by fellow Americans from all walks of life. And at long last, in 1988, we were joined by the Congress and the President of the United States when the Civil Liberties Act of 1988 was signed into law. For Japanese Americans, the passage of the Civil Liberties Act lifted the burden of shame under which we had labored for so many years. But for the nation, it symbolized a renewed commitment to the ideals of our great Constitution and a national resolve that no injustice like the internment will ever again be visited on any American community. Now, Washington, D.C., as all of you know, is a city of great and enduring monuments. The Washington Monument recalls for us the father of our nation who led us in the fight for independence. The Jefferson Memorial reminds us of the great thinkers who helped shape our nation. And the Lincoln Memorial evokes the first step that our nation took on a path of understanding the value and dignity of all human life. But the National Japanese American Memorial is truly unique. It commemorates a tragic injustice, but it also stands for the proposition that as a great nation, it lies within our powers to recognize the mistakes of the past and to build a national commitment that those mistakes must never, ever be repeated. And so this memorial embodies both those messages and will serve as a reminder to future generations, long after those of us who experienced the internment are gone. The promises of equal justice, due process, and fairness contained in our Constitution are not promises made to us by a piece of paper under glass in the National Archives. They are promises that all of us as Americans have made to each other. And so this memorial represents a national rededication to those promises that we have made to each other as Americans, and a commitment that as a people we will not allow those promises to be broken ever again. And on this day, that is a commitment and an ideal of which all Americans can be proud. Thank you very much.